2,000 plus visits. Not 40, not 100, 2,000 plus PVA sustained over a period of 6 years straight. Today's guest is unbelievable. He's actually one of my favorite human beings. So I'm very excited to show you guys what our conversation was like for the last 1 hour. I learned so much. His name is Vismai, and he is this perfect blend between old philosophy and the combination of new technology, and how you guys can benefit from his knowledge and experience. If you're a chiropractor, if you're a clinic owner, you will not regret this show. Now let's get back to it. Guys, welcome back to the Practice Peak podcast. And today I am so excited. This is not a normal smile although I often smile, but we have an amazing guest, an amazing human being, and it's Vismai. And Vismai, actually, we just off camera were saying how we've never actually met in person. I think we've tried 25 different times.
Just missed each other all the time without planning.
We've missed each other without planning. And it just feels like there's so much we would like to share with the audience. So this one will be really, really special for the audience, actually selfishly for me, to pick your brains, Vismai. And the theme around today is chiropractic care as a long-term adoption. And I cannot think of anyone better to interview and sit down with than yourself, sir. So thank you very much for being here.
Yes, thanks for having me on the podcast.
Now, I can start with structured questions, but people know us now that it's more about understanding the human behind the screen. And Vismai, whether we agree or disagree on this, my experience has been that people that truly have an impact on the profession, they're not just born this way, they're built. And I really want to understand, before we talk about strategy and the projects you're involved with, who is Vismai? Let's think before chiropractic college. And I love the ages, that kind of 5 to 15. Let's bring you back.
I grew up in a small country town about 2 hours outside of Melbourne. And I had a really innocent, lovely childhood, actually. School was across the road. My mum was a stay-at-home mum. It was just really stable. I got introduced to chiropractic quite young. So I've had a very nice, I just grew up in a wholesome country town. I played football. My weeks were quite rhythmic. We used to go to church every week. I'd play football every week. I had football training. I was a long distance runner. I had the same girlfriend growing up in the village. And I guess that was the start of me just being quite stable with loyalty in relationships. I really value loyalty really highly. And that's sort of, I guess, when I started getting into chiropractic care and my love of chiropractic, and then people just weren't sticking around, I was just dumbfounded. I was like, how can they not be just so loyal to me,
Did it feel personal?
Sorry?
Did it feel personal?
No, it was more like, well, I started off blaming them, thinking, oh, they didn't get it.
Of course.
And then I started just completely obsessing over how can I really invite people into long-term chiropractic adoption. And that just became a lifelong journey for me, and I've had great metrics with that, actually, and how people just choose chiropractic care as a staple part of their lifestyle, voluntarily, mind you, not out of fear-based or not out of coercion, like just really people who are raising their hand to say, hey, Vismai, I'm into what you do. You don't have to re-exam me every 20 or 15 or 12 visits. I'm in this, for the long term. And that was wonderful. But I did obsess over it for a good 5 years before everything kind of clicked in the practice.
And how old were you then? How old were you?
Chiropractic care.
What stage of life is that?
So I started my practice in Amsterdam when I was 28.
Young to have a practice. Hang on. So we're skipping a stage. So you grew up just outside Melbourne, and then you opened a practice in Amsterdam. What happened?
Yeah, so in between, I studied chiropractic in Melbourne. I had my first associateship in Tasmania, and I worked there for a year and a half. That was my only time I worked for somebody else, and that was my time that I really learned from a master. And Ken used to see one new person for every 2,000 or 3,000 returning visits. So for me, it was a little bit normal. But the funny thing was that office was sort of split with a hallway down the middle, and on one side there was me, the new grad, and the other side was Ken, the master. Beautiful guy, beautiful. I'm so grateful the universe put me in his guidance, you know. He took this responsibility of introducing a new grad into the profession really gracefully. Always made time for me, and people would waft out of his rooms and, see you next week, Ken, and they'd all make appointments and they'd all be feeling better. And my side, everyone would have questions. Nobody was getting better. Nobody was referring.
Oh,
Um,
that's so interesting. So you have
I
this
was just in this,
visual.
yeah, it was just like there was a closed room office and we had four rooms, reception at the front, but there was just this really clear difference. But I was really hungry and really thirsty to learn. So anytime I had a gap in my agenda, I was just always in Ken's room. I just listened to this beautiful master just speak about chiropractic, and he loved chiropractic. Him and his wife Karen, and they had us for dinner every Wednesday night. They'd cook up a nice meal out at their country home with light a big fireplace, and sorry, Mel.
No, that's all good.
uh, and so that was just a really great way to get introduced to the profession. And I guess that raised the bar for me then because I saw all of Ken's waiting list. I didn't generate any new clients for the first 12 months, I reckon. Maybe at the most two or three. They all come from Ken. And he always made me feel like I was a bit more special than I was, but somehow that grew my confidence to get into the profession.
That's so interesting. Wow. I mean, again, we can go in so many different directions, but I'm imagining the people listening and watching. I always have this saying, and this kind of motto I live by is: don't necessarily model the peak, model the climb. So don't do what Vismai is doing now, because when Vismai was starting, sounds like you use the word universe, but I'm not sure if it's universe, if it's calculated luck, if it's
Hmm.
passion or a combination of things. But what would we advise someone who was in your shoes back then? Do we want to start a clinic from scratch straight away after graduating? Do you want to find a big, busy practice? Do you want to find someone who really cares about you as a mentor? I think that first year of practice shapes so much of your ongoing belief system.
Yeah, yeah. And I like what you said about the climb. Like you can often learn a lot more from somebody who's just 2 or 3 years ahead of you than somebody who's like 30 years ahead of you as far as time goes. But what would I advise? I would definitely advise to go and interview the person. So don't think because you're looking for work that they're interviewing you. Really should be the opposite way. So, and you want to find a person who you want to emulate. So it's one thing to have a really high volume, successful practice, but then if their private life or their health is something completely different, that just didn't attract me. So I just wanted to find somebody who I thought's kind of living a rounded, nice life. They sported enough, they cared for the people around them. I'm attracted, I've always been attracted to just a nice settled family life, and it sounds a bit boring, but I kind of like that. I grew up in one, and now I have my own nice little family,
I,
and
I
Ken
would not call you boring, guys.
Ken Ken had that too, and it wasn't. Yeah, I don't know. You should just be around people who you want to be like, rather than just thinking about all the, how much income you're going to make. Of course, it's really important. You don't want to be in a practice in an office as a new grad that's starving for clients, because you're going to really burn through a lot of people. So don't put yourself in a position where you get interviewed by somebody and they say, "Well, we're going to start some ads when you come." And then we'll really get your agenda busy. It's you really want to enter a practice that's just peaking. So we always had a rule in Holland. So we had 4 or 5 associates at its peak, and we only introduced a new chiropractor when we had between 50 and 80 people on a waiting list. So then there was just no stress on me as the main chiropractor to try
Constantly
and
have to.
keep all these numbers up with people. So go into a practice that's people are walking their talk. That's really nice.
I love that. So you're 28 years old and you've decided
Mhm.
Amsterdam, we're opening a practice. What does that first
Mm.
12, 24 months look like for you? Are you stressed? Are you chilled? Are you
No, the
excited?
initial part, well, we were pregnant actually. We had Dali in the belly, and we really had no money. And I remember there was a friend who was in 50 when I was in first year, and he'd opened up like 20 practices in London, Matthew, and I really had no money and I had no visa to work in Holland. So I phoned up Matthew. We hadn't spoken, and I said, "Oh, listen, I'm in a real predicament. I've got no money. I've got a baby coming. Can you just give me a locum?" And he said, "No worries. Come over." Back then, it wasn't a flight. I hopped on this V-Lines bus to go over to. I got into London, Victoria. Matthew picked me up, and he just gave me some locums in busy practices, and it was wonderful. So then I supplemented. Once we did start the practice, I supplemented locums for the first 2 years while the practice was building up. So it didn't go from like 0 to 300 or something. I think it took maybe 9 months to get to 60 visits. And then we kind of hovered around that for quite a while. And then we got our first associate when I was seeing about, I don't know, 120 people, which has always been my sweet spot in my career. I kind of like that number. And then slowly we just leapfrogged. I wrote a book. We started doing these community challenges and events, and we just started to just gain a lot of loyalty around. And people in my agenda weren't really stopping with chiropractic care after those first few years. So that made it a lot easier to filter down and add associates to the model without me being stressed that I need to supply new clients and without young chiropractors being stressed that they're not having a busy enough practice. Yeah.
I love that. And I just hope people are like rewinding this and listening to it over and over again because some of the stuff you're saying, only when you have enough scar tissue, you realize you didn't read this from a book. You've had to live it and you had to build yourself and probably change your identity a few
And
times.
also
And
just be really gentle with the your scars that you build up as you go through the career. It's a hard job taking care of people all day. There's a lot of energy outlay, and I remember in those first couple of years, there'd often be times at night where I'd wake up in bed thinking, "Oh, I wish I didn't say that to that client," and "Oh, how am I going to repair that? Or next time they come in, I'm going to do this," and it was just a lot. So anyway, we started the practice. We did some great locums, of course. I did locums anytime we wanted a family holiday. I combined that with a locum somewhere. We had some friends in Portugal and friends in London, and that's how we got off to a start. Yeah, and then fast forward 15 years later, and then we sold the practice, and then we actually took a 5-year break, and we just traveled around the world and homeschooled the kids, and ended up in Bali after that. Yeah.
for the listeners and people watching, you're currently in Singapore, which is your current practice, right?
Yes, yes, I've been practicing here for 7 years now.
Okay.
And so I fly up and back every week from Bali to Singapore. I'm here 3 nights a week and Bali 4 nights a week.
But this is from one friend to another. You do know that's not the norm, right?
Yeah,
How
of
do you
course.
have this level of like thinking and creativity? Because no one will even consider
Well, I
having.
didn't consider it either. I'd like to tell you that I really thought about it and this and that, but it the family just didn't want to leave Bali, but I really wanted to work. I hadn't worked in so long, and after I just really missed being a chiropractor, and I started taking less good care of myself and stopped surfing. And I just needed some more stress or some activity and which is really interesting because when you're working flat out, you think, I just need a break the whole time. Why is life just, especially in the phase you're in with young kids and your coaching work and your practice and and then it stopped, but I'll never retire ever. I'll be doing work in some form right up until the moment I die because I just had that gap where I just see now how important it is just to have a community around me and have some stimulation and some stress and some challenges and things to navigate. Yeah.
Love that. Yeah, it's amazing. What I was starting to say was when we first connected, um, we were on FaceTime and you were in a house in Bali, if you remember.
Hmm.
And it was just the most beautiful, like chilled place. And is this like I was trying to prepare for the podcast, and there were so many labels that I could give you: the
Hmm.
architect, the student, the
Yeah, I
the
love
hardware
design. I
engineer.
really enjoyed design actually.
I
That
can
was
tell.
one really good move we made. We went from having a mortgage in Holland of 1.25 million euro mortgage to buying a house in Java for $6,500, putting it on a truck and bringing it back to the rice fields of Bali and building it. So we live in a house that's got no walls, everything's secondhand. It's just beautiful structure and architecture. And that's just been our family home, and we really love living around the gentleness and the softness of the Balinese. By the way, there's a really great secret in the way that the Balinese people live their life and how it relates to chiropractic and retention. The Balinese, they're naturalists. They're naturalists to the core, so they just love everything about nature. But they're extremely rhythmic. This is a very nice segue into, you know, encouraging people to adopt long-term chiropractic care, is that your office needs a rhythm. It needs an immediate post-adjustment of rhythm. It needs a weekly rhythm, a monthly rhythm, a 6 week, a quarterly rhythm, a biannual rhythm, and an annual rhythm. And the Balinese have really got that. And most major religions have got it too. You know, Christians have got Christmas and Easter. The Muslims have got now Ramadan. So they're not, you know, I live in a Muslim country. They're not eating now for 30 days during daylight times. And I kind of, because I was obsessed so much over retention and how we could get people to stay in care, I really studied the world's major religions and their rhythms. That's why we call it the quarterly newsletter. That's why we call it the biannual community challenge. That's why we call it the book of the month. That's why we call it the immediate post adjustment rhythm. They're all kind of rhythmic things that don't rely on my discipline. They're not random at all. They're just very well thought out things. But I kind of got all those ideas from the world's major religions, actually.
That's
Yeah.
very interesting. Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. The more I call them these like mental models, the more mental models about the world and about nature and human psychology you collect, the more everything else starts to make more sense.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Do you
When you
find?
see those rhythms, you kind of see them everywhere, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, and of course patients will love to have predictability and rhythm. Of course they would.
Mhm.
No one
Mm.
likes unpredictable chaos. Tell me like what's
No.
coming up. But I would say that you are known for the PVA guy. I don't know if you want to be that way, but you have the um you've painted the path in the past that you did something that wasn't typical, whether you
No.
knew it or not. And my question is for people who want to improve their retention, they want to understand more about how do I create less stress in my practice to constantly have to rely on new patients and
Hmm.
marketing and all this stuff?
Hmm.
Is it something that was reverse engineered? When was the first time you thought about this concept of retention versus top of funnel marketing?
Mm.
And was
Well, I
it
think that the idea that, you know, that you don't have to constantly market, I think retention is the ultimate form of marketing, actually. It's very hard or to do retention really well. And that's because you just really need to think about it. There is a strategy to it. So you know, if you're particularly good looking and charismatic and you've got a great, you're a strong communicator, you'll get your PVA to around 40. A good charismatic leader you'll get that for free. Now, if you're born not with nice long legs and you're not the best looking and you're a bit awkward with people then your PVA will just naturally be a little bit lower, right? But after you go through like, you know, pain related care into corrective care into kind of maintenance care. For me, that's still practice hell in that sphere. But to get into like emotional support or performance based chiropractic or lifestyle adoption, you've really got to have something completely different, and it has to be well thought about. And so otherwise people, after they haven't had a symptom for like 6 months, this is where maintenance people sort of drop out. They'll say, oh, look, Stefan, I haven't, you know, you've been great. My headache hasn't been there now for 6 months. So I'm just going to see how it goes. And they're the people then that they even refer to you even when they stop coming. And they say, I'll come back if the headache comes back. And they do if it comes back. They do come back, you know. But they kind of miss that idea of ascending into something a lot deeper with chiropractic. Um, and that's something to really, really think about, actually. Yeah.
it's not random. It's very much designed.
Yeah, it's absolutely designed. Did I reverse engineer it? No. Like I'd like to be able to sit here and say that it happened. I really thought this up, but it wasn't so much like that because I was like, you know, as a young entrepreneur and my CAs, we have three CAs. Then most of the CAs are actually still in the office from 26 years ago. But they were very rhythmic people. They all had animals. They all had dogs that needed to be walked each time. They all lived within like 200 meters of the practice. all this sort of stuff, right? And they found me quite chaotic. So they were like, right, let's just go and get a rhythm to this guy. So they kind of, they were into volunteering at the fire brigade. So they'd have very rhythmic weeks, actually. They were at the school, the kids' soccer each week. So they kind of pushed their rhythm and their stability onto me. And that kind of blossomed then into the practice. And so I would go as far as saying my CAs were the ones that really, let's say, invented this whole concept of a retention vortex.
What is
And
the retention vortex? Do you want to
so
give
our
us?
retention vortex is essentially a 6 month pattern that we rinse and repeat in the practice. And I'd just like to say that it's an engagement process beyond the adjustment. So how are ways that I can get a client to engage in our service that's not the adjustment, that the CAs can really carry, that the CAs can be viewed as somebody from the client's perspective, that they can be viewed as somebody that really knows what's going on in the chiropractic office. I believe 50% of the retention is responsible for me, the chiropractor, and 50% is for the CAs.
That's
And so
interesting.
we built tools for them to use to be a lot more trustworthy in the eyes of the clients. Because essentially, like, there's a real shift in people who you sell to. Like at the start, when somebody comes in as a new client, you've got to be quite skilled at offering them a solution to their issue and skillfully selling it, especially now because there's a lot of different options that people can use. But actually, to change people from someone who's being sold to into somebody who buys from,
Supply.
this is very different. So the CAs are the people they buy from. I'm the person I sell to, but my CA is the person who buys from. And I like to take new clients to a certain journey that shows her trustworthiness and her knowledge and understanding and willingness to serve our community beyond the adjustment. And a part of that's just a rhythm.
Love
Yeah.
that. Yeah,
Mm.
I mean, I hope people are making notes because we're talking to someone who, what was it, like PVA of 2000 plus over a 6 year period.
Mm.
Some people
Yeah, that
might
wasn't
think,
a flash in the pan. Like the PVA is a funny metric because if you've got a PVA, most people that start thinking, "Oh, I want to increase my PVA, they generally have one between 23 and 26. I'd say 90% of people that say they want to start getting onto that, that's where they start. And then your PVA, if you build all the tools and you start to use them and master them, your PVA it's a slow moving metric. It's like compound interest. Our mind doesn't do very well with compound interest. Linear, our mind goes okay. So with your retention, it goes like 25, 25, gets to 50, gets to 50, gets to 70, gets to 200. Then it really quickly flicks to 2000. And it just doesn't, it's like the compound interest. If you save for your retirement when my son's age, 22, if you start then, or if you start when you're my age, you just can't catch up to that.
sure,
And that's the thing with retention too. So for the listeners, if your retention's a little bit lower, like under 20, and you're wanting to improve it, just don't break your marketing system that you've got going now. So if you're really relying on Facebook ads and Google ads or whatever it is, spinal screenings, keep doing that, but at the same time, build something. I find it a real shame if people have a lot of front end ads, but they don't have this back end rhythm to invite people into. It's just a waste of resources, and it's a kind of like an unnecessary treadmill for the chiropractic business owner, but also for the clients and your community. They can just get a lot from it. Yeah.
absolutely, yeah. And me and you both know, for those people who are practicing for a while, you know that someone who's seen you for 10 years as a maintenance, preventative type of lifestyle outcome patient is a completely different type of patient compared to someone who's seen you for 6 months or 3 months or
Mm.
12 months.
Yeah. Yeah.
They've just completely embodied that way of living, and you're
Mm.
the first person they call if something goes wrong with their health
Mm.
because they're just the impact you've had in their life, which is why I don't think the two are mutually exclusive. What you're saying is do your marketing, but just start to be
Mm.
more intentional with the systems and things that you've built for practice,
Mm.
for clinics and chiropractors
Mm.
to help them help patients. And
Yeah, like I can share, like I'm in my practice now, but we have like I make a quarterly newsletter and I put a lot of energy into the design and the branding and the layout of it. So
they are the most beautiful
They
things.
really are. And we get that comment the whole time. Interestingly enough, way less people take them than 5 years ago. But what they do serve as is a real prompt for people. So if my CA is skillfully trained in if anyone's sitting in the waiting room and they pick up one of my newsletters, that's the anxious brain. This one's on burnout.
I saw that. You're very very
This
creative.
one's on children and chiropractic. If anyone picks any of those up, she's just really sees that as an opportunity to invite a discussion around that. So if somebody says, "Oh, why did you pick up burnout? Is it because you've had a burnout or your husband working in corporate Singapore?" Or it'll be a prompt.
Mm,
And
mhm.
that discussion gets skillfully pushed into many different ways. So we view the waiting room as like a serendipity place. And we do that from all sorts of prompts. We even have a lending library here, but that's not a lending library just in the sense of a lending library. It's a prompt for all sorts of different focused discussions around chiropractic care. Yeah.
Okay, I love that. Thank you so much for sharing because when I was building my practice for 5 or 6 years, and it was all about top of the funnel. Let's get more new patients in,
Hmm.
and then you start to understand data and metrics and cycles and business growth, and you realize it's just the hamster wheel. Something else needs to change, and that's when
Hmm.
we started to build our internal
I think that's a
systems.
really natural evolution. That at a certain point you want to change. Yeah.
Yeah, and then you kind of I keep stumbling across this term that you just used, serendipity. But I've read some of the blogs that you've written, and let me see if we can put you on the spot here. This
Mhm.
you say engineering serendipity, which to me it almost sounds paradox. Is that
Mm.
does that make
It's a
sense?
complete conflict of terms. Like engineering is to prepare, and serendipity is to live by chance.
So what does
So,
that mean to you? What does that actually mean
well,
practically in
the
numbers?
engineering serendipity is like, we have to make this really pragmatic, we have this thing in the practice called stretching the moment. So um, uh, if somebody asks, can chiropractic help with something?
Hmm.
We'll instead of saying straight away, yeah, we see loads of people with headaches, we'll be like, okay, how long has the person had it and how did it start? It's just two really simple questions. We call it stretching the moment. And it's one of Stephen Covey's 7 habits of highly effective people was like first seek to understand and then after that have the courage to be understood. So how can we plan that serendipity happens way more? And we do it with these vortex tool prompts. If you've got no newsletters laying around, you're not going to have the serendipity from the newsletter. If you don't have a lending library with great titles and keep refreshing it, you're not going to get serendipity. If you don't have a community event at least once or twice a year where you get your favorite people together, you're not going to get a whole heap of referrals from that because you're not creating this atmosphere. So, and
That's the
then
engineered part, I guess.
that's the engineered part, but there's one more part to the engineering, and that is tracking. So we'll often
That's the
say,
boo term.
this is already like if somebody says, oh, my husband's had low back pain for 2 years, my CA she'll say, well, why don't you take that newsletter home from Vismai? He wrote a great newsletter on back pain a couple of years ago. And then that's it, right? Sometimes we make an appointment immediately, but most people don't know their partner's schedule and they like to go home. So give that to your husband, see if it makes sense. If it does, you're back here Thursday at 5, we can make an appointment for him. So we kind of seed that thing and it just really accelerates those clients that are kind of sitting on the fence. But if that's all, we don't track it when that client's back on Thursday at 5, we just miss the serendipity again. It needs to be followed through. The tenacity in the path of the serendipity sphere. There's a very nice book. It's called Connecting the Dots, and he's got a whole anatomy of like how serendipity works. Great book, by the way, for a chiropractic waiting room. But you got to just then have prompts in the waiting room where the serendipity can unfold. It looks like serendipity, but it's engineered. That's what I mean by engineering serendipity.
Yeah, yeah, and it makes so much sense. When I was reading your blogs and I was thinking about in nature, where else, or just in general, where else do we see this concept of engineering serendipity? And
Mm.
I thought of it as like the mad scientist who does they go with a hypothesis and they're going to do this experiment, but because everything is controlled and is predictable and is measured, sometimes the outcome of the experiment created a completely different cure for something that
Mm.
wasn't the intention.
I
And
think a lot of science works like that.
yeah,
So the engineering is the laboratory and being open to all sorts of different directions that it's going in.
and we're
And then
definitely
also engineering a rhythm, just really engineering a rhythm into that.
I love that. And for people who have big teams, I guess that was also important is to have rhythm with the team and team
Mhm.
development and managing. You said
Yeah, team
you had,
training. We used to go to seminars every year. We'd go to different seminars, and that formed a backbone for them hearing the same message, but then not from me. Sometimes I'd say things for 2 or 3 years, and then they'd hear it from a speaker at Cara Europe, or we went to Texas a couple of times for seminars, and they'd be like, "Oh, you said this," and they just hear it differently when it comes from different people. So that was great also to expose the team to that actually. But that formed the glue of the team. And I think the team culture, because we're working in a very confined small space, most of us, right? You have to get along. So your recruitment is really critical. So I always hire really, really slowly. Also, my chiropractors, we had a waiting list practice, but we also had 90 chiropractors on a waiting list for a job that might come up. So that
that's
was really
genius.
interesting. So you create one waiting list, and then we had a waiting list for CAs, waiting list for clients, waiting list for chiropractors. It was just wonderful. And I think we just had an amazing kind of culture that we could invite people into. And yeah.
I'm sitting here and I have to be fully transparent because I think this is important to have these interviews. I'm sitting here and I'm thinking, how much of this thing you've built over time and the success you've had, not financially, just with clients and with the life you've built, how much of it was down to systems and how much of it was down to Vismai being Vismai? Because you're an awesome
Mm.
human being and
I
you're
think
like,
though, yeah, thank you. But I think if I look at any successful habits that came in my life, like any, and I mean ruthlessly, any, they all had systems.
yeah,
They really did. So I'm doing a workbook at the moment with some friends. We're just working through it, the James Clear Atomic Habits workbook. It's such an awkward process to go through. But when you ask me that question, I can really categorically say now, it was really a lot about the systems that we had in place. The only thing I have as a caveat to that, of course, in 1996, I collapsed on a beach in Africa and I woke up 10 days later in London. As it turned out, I died. I had a near-death experience, this whole cliche
whoa.
thing. So that gave me a very different view on um, life. Like, it just gave me,
How old were you?
I was 23, 22, 23. Mm.
Whoa.
So I had to
And
learn
what
how to
was
walk
different?
again. I had to learn how to talk again. I had to, I was 42 kilos. It was just a very, super intense time.
Whoa.
Yeah.
How would you say that changed you? Do you mind me asking?
Well, I just find life really entertaining now. Like even the worst day I have now, like shit goes wrong all the time, right?
But do you remember it quite well, being in that dark
Oh yeah,
spot?
I remember the near-death experience way more than the reality that I'm in now.
What? I mean, it's interesting that you say that because I think I was 2 years older than you when a similar thing happened to me. I almost died and I had to have this huge life-changing surgery. And on the outside, life was amazing.
Hmm.
But it's difficult to give someone that perspective if they haven't had this unfortunate event.
Mm.
My
Yeah,
staff are
sometimes
like,
I think that if everybody had a near-death experience, but without having to go through the hell, um, you know, I still, often challenges have their silver lining. That certainly had a silver lining for me.
yeah,
So
yeah.
I just had a lot more adventurous spirit. I was a lot more happy-go-lucky with stuff.
After.
Because, yeah, and still till this day, because my whole life flashed before me like an over-detailed short film. I remembered literally everything. And it was like this cosmic joke got revealed to me. And I was like, no, everything made sense, like intensely. Even the worst day I had, like, I remember at grade 9, I had this kid picking on me at school for a couple of years. And we had this fight on the last day of school. And it was the worst day ever. But anyway, even that, I was like, oh, and that led to this and this did this. And it was fascinating. So now I can't not
I
see
see
that
it.
in all my life now. So, I just had this longing for, I thought, oh gosh, one last cup of tea with my mum would be great, or, listen to some music would be great, or just to touch another person would be great. So I come back with a lot of gratitude
Wow.
and just a lot of, I'm just in for the ride now, just a nice, entertaining life.
Got a second chance.
Yeah, no, really. What a blessing to measure life against no life is really, really
Yeah.
lovely, actually.
Some less um, extreme version of that story is a patient coming to see you with back pain, can't pick up the grandkids,
Mm.
has really, really sleepless nights, and sometimes we just see them as a number or as a booking on our system instead of really truly feeling empathy towards that person.
Mm.
Now, there is something that maybe you can share with us. It's up to you, but tell me more about the ascension system or framework that you have. And
Yeah, so I really like working with frameworks, and I've been teaching this retention work now for a good 15 years. And in the early days, I just told people what I did and thought that if they did that, then they would get the same result. But it actually didn't work like that in the reality. So I just sort of really thought, how could I work out a nice teaching model for it? But is it for the people listening? I'm just going to share a visual screen now, so I'll go through that and I'll just try and talk you through that too at the same time.
yeah, that would be awesome. That would be really helpful.
So let me find the page here. So I like to break it down into how do we intentionally ascend a client through care? And if we think about their level of appreciation towards chiropractic and towards me, also their level of proactivity towards the healing process and actually the journey. And then what issue they would generally come in with, the PVA, how many times will they come to me, and what's their evolution, what's their understanding of chiropractic. So for me, 99.9% of people come in, they'd have complete apathy towards chiropractic.
Explain apathy for the people that don't know
Apathy,
what you
they
mean.
just don't really care about chiropractic. They certainly don't care about me. They've got something that they want fixed. That's it. It's simple as it is. They come in purely for symptom relief. And here am I standing on the other end of the spectrum, drinking the chiropractic Kool-Aid, thinking, come in for life, right? So this is a path. We have to really skillfully do this. And if I miss any of these steps, even though I've been learning this for 30 years now, if I miss these steps, it always comes back to bite me. So it's always a new start with a new person. The major tool that I use to get people from the red zone, which is the apathy symptom relief, into corrective care, is my new client welcome booklet. It's a very thought about, engaging document that they take home, right? But by doing that, it actually raises their understanding and their appreciation of chiropractic from being completely apathetic about it to having a bit of awareness about, oh, okay, this is how my body works. And then slowly people become a bit more attracted to chiropractic. These people, generally maintenance people, generally still come in for pain, as in preventing pain. Maintenance does make sense to these people. So the difference between someone coming in just for symptoms, they might come in 6 times, whereas the maintenance person might come in 20 to 50. But for me, these bottom three, they're still kind of a form of practice hell, actually. And then something very, very strong happens when you cross this chasm. So this is where people start to go from apathy of awareness and then to attraction into adoption. They start to adopt you. This is where trust starts to emerge. This is where the number of mastered, engaged vortex tools start to emerge. They come in for health. They come in for emotional support. They come in for a little bit more depth. And if the person's at that maintenance level and you don't have the skills to nudge them through, or you don't have the prompts in the waiting room to nudge them into this level, emotional support meaning a bit more complexity than what they've first initially came in for. If you don't have that skill or those prompts, it's hard to get people to hear. But if you get into that green zone, they will come in 50 to 100 times to you. And then we've got the performance people. So these are people that are really into neurology. They love to know that we're taking care of their nervous system. You can speak quite freely about nervous system connection. natural cleverness of the body. I still sometimes talk about universal intelligence with these people, but also sometimes not. It's a very much a nuance.
Mm-hmm.
These are people that also measure everything. They love metrics. They all wear personal trackers. They like to assess their stress levels from their trackers after their chiropractic adjustment. They like to see their scans. They love having a look at x-rays. They love objective outcomes and objective measurements. And they're often kind of A players in life. But these people, they're often they've got a high affinity with your work, but they often don't refer people to you. They just like to get in and out. They're quite private people. They love your work, they value, but they don't refer so much. And then you've got the advocates. So the difference between somebody who's got affinity and somebody who's an advocate, they're engaged with me, but they also refer. And these people will come, 300 times to you at least over the course of their life. So, and every level's apathy creep is at every level. So even somebody that's been to me 100 times, I'm still always thinking these guys can stop care. So I just table talk with them differently. I offer them different things. I invite them into the community events a lot more. The people who are down in the red and orange zone, the symptom relief and the corrective care, it's a bit displaced if I go and invite them to a juice cleanse or I invite them to a 50,000 step walking challenge that we're doing this year in May, because they're there for a completely different reason. But, they would just want something fixed. So it's really weird then if I go and invite them into something that's not relevant to them. So it's very nuanced how you do this. But getting people into a community challenge once or twice a year, that's also a way of tracking and tallying up things. Some people say, oh, I've done 8 of these challenges. Oh, that means I've been here for this many years, or I've been collecting your newsletters, or whatever it is. So that's the breakdown of the model of how we ascend clients into care.
Yeah, I love that. And I know when I speak to someone with experience because the experiments you ran to create that mental model and framework for yourself is probably thousands and thousands of thousands of trials to
Mm.
start to identify these patterns, which is very, very interesting. And imagine if every new clinician or every young clinic owner has the exposure to the self-awareness that you have and the tools that you've built. How can people get hold of those tools?
Oh, they can just reach out to me. I'm very approachable. They can message me on Facebook, or I think
Do
they
you
had
offer them for other clinics? Obviously, for an
yeah, no, people can buy the models that I've got. They're all on Canva actually, and they've been really well designed and branded. So people can just change their logos for mine, and of course remove my personal photos and put their own in. But there's a very great framework for the tools. But people can buy them online, and
That's
but
great.
whoever's listening, they can reach out to me some way. Messenger, they can reach out to. You saw my website, no?
Yes.
Yeah, thevismai.com. Is that still active? Yeah. Okay, that's where you went.
We'll
Okay.
make sure we put that on the show notes so people can reach out. But there's a
Yeah.
couple. Are we okay on time?
Yeah, sure.
I wanted to talk about one of the most exciting things that we haven't had a chance to talk about. And we talk about outcomes. We talk about how do I have a more objective measure of people's health when they're not in my office?
Mm,
And maybe a year ago, me and you connected and you said, hey, dude, what do you think about this design? And I've actually, funny enough, back then I was a little bit more before that, I was thinking about doing that in my clinic. But if an expert like you does it,
mhm,
I have no space in the marketplace for one of the most. I'm kind of confused because you're this amazing designer. We talk about human psychology, but then you're now like hardware and you're going to manufacturing and
mm.
the Cairo ring. Is that right?
Yeah,
Tell us
yeah.
about this because I'm super excited for
Power
the
ring.
profession.
It's the world's first ring that just tracks the state of your nervous system.
I love
And
that.
it's got two main things. One, the end user, the whole overarching vision for it is to elevate your human experience.
What was the day that you had the vision or the idea? Was there a specific
There
like
was something very specific happen. A lady came in 4 years ago wearing her aura ring. She was on the way to the airport and she says to me, last time I was here, I had my heart rate dropped off a lot when I was getting adjusted. And then now I'm a bit stressed. My ring told me I need to go to chiropractic. And I was like, what?
Whoa.
It was just a moment for me. This might have been 4 or 5 years ago. Victoria, she still comes in all the time. Anyway, I reach out to Oro and I'm like, oh, I'd love to learn more about this. Is we way we can get data or this? And of course, that data is not available for the chiropractic profession. So the second part of why we did it was like, I didn't want to have chiropractic just left behind again with just moving on with tech.
Me
So,
and your son and you talked about this before the show.
yeah, on one hand, I'm this sort of easy hippie. On the other hand, I just don't want to be the guy that just doesn't know how to use AI or doesn't know how to measure stuff or doesn't go and embrace tech into our organic world, actually. So the other thing we really like about this is that because people come in, they press play on their app when they're getting a live adjustment. It's quite fascinating to watch what happens with people's heart rates during an adjustment. And then we've built an AI agent in the back of that. So when all the adjustments get logged, it can just go and scour all the data on sleep, steps, heart rate, and just see what actually happens around that. And we're doing an accuracy test starting next month with the University of New Zealand, the New Zealand College of Chiropractic. So we're going to do I think it's a 6 month accuracy test with about 30 people, just to test this against all different grades of testing. So that's why we built it to to elevate people's human experience, but then also for chiropractic. What actually has happened, which we didn't anticipate, is it's been great for the business because people see the ring on my clients. They're out at the cup of coffee or a tea. It's like having a business card for the practice on people's fingers. So they often say my chiropractor, I use this to help measure my adjustments and my sleep and my step count. Oh, who's this guy? And so we've had a lot of referrals from that, which I didn't anticipate. And we've had a lot of people just have a lot more knowledge about their body. So I feel like the partnership model becomes a lot more collaborative with clients. And whether we like it or not, the public's starting to know way more about their health than even 10 years ago. So this tech, it's just a great gadget tech tool to help enhance the research and the future of chiropractic. Yeah.
I just think it's a genius idea. And probably the timing couldn't have been better with data collection, AI making life a lot easier,
Yeah,
engaging
and it's
clients.
a cool little thing. Like it sits on this little charging deck. It's just such a beautiful little
Oh, wow.
minimal design. And
And
you
we
get
can
this
go, I can go
sizing
to
kit.
your,
So before when you order that, you get a sizing kit so that you make sure they get the right size. And then you also get this nice little travel charger. So this holds like 30 days of battery. So if you're traveling, you just load that up and the ring can just go in there at night.
yeah.
It's great.
I'm gonna go and buy one. I have this one. I was testing some like different chips for accuracy. Um,
Mhm.
and it's crazy like how much you have thought about this, but also how engineering serendipity, how there's some other things that will come out of it that will be beautiful for practice building, for patient retention, for
Yeah.
just nervous system health that we can once again be the cool guys in the industry. The chiropractors are
Yeah, so
cool.
that's what I thought too, like it's so nice to see. I honestly, I'm super excited about what all this data is gonna. I mean, we've sold it now in 15 countries. There's adjustments getting logged every single day. So the uptake's been great actually from the curiosity point. It hasn't begun without its problems. Don't get me wrong. Yesterday we actually had the first day of the history of the app where it actually crashed for the day. That was a very stressful day. It's back and running now. But we've had inaccuracies, data not working, connection links wrong, but it's settling each month that goes by. And we also had 22 rejections from the App Store initially because they graded it as a medical device, and the Singapore government saying it's not a medical device, it's a wellness tracker. So we got stuck in between this, and then we just had to just keep going through this whole process. That was probably one of the most stressful 6 weeks in my life. But I've just got a burning desire to have this for our clients and also for our profession. I just
Yeah.
think that's where it's all going. I mean, I'm in Singapore. It's probably quite a tech hub. So the amount of wearable technology here is quite phenomenal, and people like to see those objective results.
Do you have any
So
cool trends so far from your existing
I
patients?
have one trend that is really interesting. And that is when you separate occiput and C1, heart rate drops 20% within like 3 or 4 seconds. That's really interesting for me to see that routinely. I'd say in 90, 80, 90% of people. So something's happening when you relieve something around the brainstem area that the body just so goes into relaxation.
Interesting.
And it's very, very consistent. And I speak with Pat Mack from the Syntropy training, and he's also got some really nice graphs to show that that's one of the real alterations in heart rate is separating that C1 and occiput. That I find really good. Yeah.
I just did a podcast with a gentleman, very controversial guy, super intelligent, uh, diehard chiropractic student, and not a student, the student of chiropractic. He's actually well into AI. His name is Tristan from the
Hmm.
States. And I can see you guys on some level collaborating projects because they're building this huge AI database that communicates with large language models on chiropractic outcomes. So
Hmm.
the way patients will choose care is not going to be based on my reviews or
Mm.
SEO optimization. Is going to be on Vismai's clinic does C0, C1 adjustments, and based on their ring data, we believe that this can help your headaches and so on and so forth.
Mm.
So when I'm searching solutions for headaches and migraines,
Mm.
the measurable outcome is what gets prescribed by the AI instead of who is ranking top on Google.
Mm. Yeah, that makes sense to me.
So I
I think
think that what you're building, and sorry, it's chiroring.com.
yes,
Okay.
CHIRORING.com.
All right, we'll put it in the show
My
notes.
wife Jyoti built the website. It's really beautiful.
I had a
Mm.
look earlier. I'm gonna buy one. So chiropractors can buy one. You
Yeah.
can. Do you offer it to corporations? Have you
Yeah,
started
yeah,
that
yeah.
scale yet?
That's been taken up really nicely actually. So sometimes chiropractors will buy 20 or 50 rings and they'll either give it to clients or they'll use it as a part of a community challenge or Christmas giftology or they'll give it to their CAs or we're doing a walking challenge. We're collaborating with 6 other practices here in Singapore in May, and we're doing a walking challenge. So the ring's going into all the clinics around, and and then people start to associate. It kind of broadens their idea around chiropractic. It really highlights the relationship between the adjustment and the central nervous system. Yeah. They just think about chiropractic really differently. What? The adjustment can influence my sleep or my stress levels? Oh, really? Okay. It's just a real prompt for another discussion. Yeah.
I think it's
And there's
brilliant.
a real power in personal health metrics. People love accountability. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I think it's just I can't think of anything negative about the concept and the project. So I'll try to
Mm.
support you guys as much as
Yeah,
I can.
I think probably the only thing where I don't think it's for everybody technology. Like if somebody's really like hypochondriac or they're really worrying the whole time and they see metrics, like it's not really for everybody. But if you're kind of you check your metrics every so often, you check your sleep, you like to know that you've walked a certain amount of steps each day. It's kind of nicely goal oriented. It's a little bit gamifying health actually. And it's the accountability with yourself to,
That's the big for me from the very young age of thinking about wearables. By far is the biggest return of our investment. It's waking up and like I look at my ring and it creates atomic habits.
mm,
How do we create habits? Well, we have to have the visual cue first to then
mm,
remind you to take the action, and then you just habit stack it to something else you're already doing. So it reminds me to drink my water and to go to bed earlier. And the return on investment for my health, having something like what you
yeah,
guys are offering,
that's
it's
really
insane.
crazy, really is. The American Sleep Association says people that measure their sleep report, like 90% of people report improved sleep because they measure it.
Because they measure it.
What you measure, you kind of manage in your life, I guess. The other thing I like about the format of a ring, it's very uninvasive technology. There's no reminders, there's no beeps, there's no vibrations.
You
You can
sleep with it and it
with
doesn't
it.
disturb you
No, exactly. So, and it also, you don't have to go on the app every day. The Ring stores data for like 7 days. And then if you open up your app, but then it just dumps it all. So it's not, you don't have to be obsessive about it. Most of our users, what we see in the trends, they're on it, I don't know, 6 to 20 times a day initially. But at a certain point after like 3 or 4 weeks, it's kind of settles into 2 or 3 times a day or 4 times a day they'll check it, the longer term users.
That's amazing. For anyone listening, if you have a practice, or even if you don't, I would 100% be checking it out.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah, please bear with us. It's in its infancy, and we're super excited to see what the AI agents are going to start to tell us about what the adjustment is possibly related to in other areas. So this is really my curiosity now. I'm like, wow, I'm just really curious what we find out with technology and deep sleep and brain cleaning and Alzheimer's disease when people sleep in deeper sleep states for more as opposed to light sleep or I'm just really curious what we actually see with objectively what chiropractic's doing on different levels. And I think if BJ Palmer was alive, I think he would love this. I think he would just think, what a time to be going with
he would be
chiropractic.
wearing one and giving it to
Yeah,
every
I'm
patient
sure. I'm sure he would be. Yeah,
of
yeah.
this. It's been an absolute honor. I think we'll have to do a part two. Maybe we'll do an annual rhythm
Yes, that would
pods
be great.
recording.
Thanks so much for having me on, Stefan. I really enjoyed the flow. It was great.
No, thank you very much for joining us. Anything you want to say to the audience? Anything that we need to check out? So we'll put the show notes, your website, and the Chiro Rings. I think that's a really exciting project for chiropractors and the profession.
I think the last thing I'd like to leave with if is just fall in love with chiropractic and fall in love with people. They're the two ingredients. Aside from all the things I've said and all the things I use and prompts and tools, the caveat is if you don't love people and you don't love chiropractic, it ain't gonna work. So that's the thing. Essentially that's the underlying thing where all this works really well, actually. But if you don't have that as your foundation, none of these tools really make that much of a difference, actually.
Vis, thank you so much, sir. We absolutely appreciate what you do and what you're doing for the profession and carrying on doing for the profession. Guys, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. That's the pod.